I was taken from my bed in the middle of the night. Posted by AlHasRed01 in subreddit r/the truth is here. Okay, so, before I get into this, I just want to say some things. First of all, I'm currently typing this out on an iPhone, so please forgive any atrocious autocorrect misspellings. I'm 28 years old. Male. I live right outside Chicago, over the border in Northwest Indiana. I'm currently pursuing a Bachelor's of Arts and Sciences at Purdue. I'm not exactly what you would call scientifically illiterate, and I consider myself fairly mentally sound. I've never had any problems on that front. I have only ever openly discussed this once before, on a random Quora question that caught my eye, also anonymously. So I'm still not very good at discussing it openly, and only 2 people who know me know what happened to me. I had avoided talking about it for a long time, fearing the stigma associated with the topic, especially in the professional and scientific communities. I was immensely relieved when the people I did open up to about it believed me unquestioningly. And the result of that is me typing this here today. Go easy on me, please. That all being said, I've been trying for a few years to come to terms with something that happened to me. It was almost 5 years ago to the day, shortly after my 23rd birthday. My father is very sick, so I was staying with my parents at the time to help take care of him in the house. I awoke in the middle of the night. It was warm, but I could hear and feel the breeze from the fans I need on to go to sleep. I reached over and grabbed my phone, checked the time. It was 3:31 a.m. I put the phone back down and tried to get settled back into a comfortable position. However, after a moment I realized I could hear and feel a humming. I knew right away it wasn't from my fans. It was very deep, and I could actually feel it in my body. Our house is by some train tracks, so at first I thought it may just be a train, but I quickly realized that wasn't it either. While I was laying in bed wondering what it was, I noticed for the first time that my door was open. My door is never open during the night. Hell, even during the day. Never. Ever, and I could see a light shining down the hallway and into my room. At first I thought maybe my dad was going to the bathroom and had his flashlight out, but then I realized the light was wrong. It wasn't the right color. As I watched, it started to get brighter, until it looked like someone had set up a white-blue LED array at the end of the hall in the kitchen. As the light got brighter, so did the humming. I tried to jump up to go investigate, fearing an intruder, when I realized I couldn't move. Well, let me clarify. I could move my hands, my neck, my feet, but it felt like someone had placed straps over my limbs and torso. After a brief moment of transcendent terror and confusion, I thought to myself, okay, maybe this is sleep paralysis. I've of course read about it before, but never experienced anything like this. Right after that thought, I realized I could no longer feel the bed under me. I started rising in the air, and gently floating, for lack of a better word, to my doorway in the light. I know how this sounds, but I'm 110% serious, please just stay with me. As I levitated through the doorway and into the hall, I had a clear view into my parents' room. Their door is right next to mine on the left-hand side of the hall when walking out of my room. If you take a step out, turn 90 degrees and take another step, you're in their room. Anyway, I could see them laying on the bed. I started screaming, begging for help. They didn't move. In fact, I couldn't even see them breathing, and at that moment I was convinced they were dead, and I was about to be next. This moment of pure unadulterated panic caused something to snap. In the blink of an eye, I found I could move my arms again, and I flailed impotently in the air. I eventually got my hands on the door frame and clung on for dear life. I gripped that frame like my life depended on it, because in that moment I wholeheartedly believed that it did. To my dismay, I realized that my fingers were slowly starting to slip, as I continued to be pulled inexorably down the hall toward the kitchen, and I dug my nails in as hard as I could to try and stop it. And in a quick burst of pain and terror I lost my grip, and continued to float. Typing this part makes me feel ridiculous, I know how it sounds. A few more seconds of terrifying levitation and I was in the kitchen, floating with the top of my head facing our back door. It's a large sliding glass door, and I could see that this is where the light was shining in from. Something that felt about as bright as the sun was hovering right above our pool. We have a large in-ground pool almost smack dab in the middle of the backyard, which is entirely fenced in with a 10-foot privacy fence. Whatever this was had to be directly over the water, maybe a couple of feet off the ground. I took all of this in within a heartbeat, and was still in a state of terror I will never be able to adequately explain, when I felt the breeze. My back door was wide open. But for the life of me I can't tell you if it had been open all along or if it had just been opened in front of me. At that moment I slowly began to settle back down onto the floor. I felt the cold floor on my back as my shirt had lifted slightly. Right as I touched the ground, I saw them. If I thought I had been afraid before, it was nothing compared to this moment right here. One stepped in and took a step to stand over me at my left side. It looked down at me, and even from my perspective on the floor I could tell this thing was fucking tall. If I had to guess, I would say 7 feet 10 to 8 feet tall at the very least. We have 9-foot ceilings in the kitchen, and its head was shockingly close to the ceiling. The light was so painfully bright at this point that I didn't get to take in a whole lot of detail, as it was kind of shadowed by the light behind us. 2 more stepped in and took a place to either side of my shoulders, standing by the door, almost like guards would. Keep in mind this has all happened fairly quickly, and in this moment I begin to have an idea of what this is. The terror is unspeakable. I remember thinking they don't look anything like how they're often portrayed in movies. They were skeletal, and their skin looked like it was, well, I have no idea, but it didn't really look like our skin. It was just strange. The one standing to the left of me had something in its hand. As I turned my neck to get a better view, I could take in a little more of its form. Its fingers. Christ, I can't even describe what seeing those fingers did to me. They were almost spider-like. Way too long and way too many joints. To this day, that's probably the one image that sticks out the most. It clutching this black, maybe gunmetal or a darker silver, hard to tell because it was smooth like glass and the light was obscuring a lot. It reminded me almost of an iPhone without any power. But it was thinner, shaped almost like a remote or a very short rod with a square-ish shape with rounded edges. Just a smooth glass-like thing. Its fingers moved over it and every single muscle in my body tensed up. The air shot into my lungs as the expanded all the way, and every single limb shot straight out. It was like I was a plank of wood. My jaw was clenched so tight I thought my teeth would shatter. I lost all control. The only thing I could move at this point were my eyes, and even then, very little. It was like the signals from my nervous system were completely disrupted, and another foreign signal was imposed in their place. The two standing behind me, above. I'm still laying flat on my back, shuffle forward a bit, and I start to rise back up again. I feel fingers on my shoulders and I begin to hover out the door. And the second I get out the door, the light is so overwhelmingly powerful and then... Nothing. I wake up in my bed. It's 5:45 a.m. I'm sweating bullets. My stomach hurts. I get up and start going about my morning routine. I try to shrug off the experience as a dream. And it works. When I'm about to get into the shower, I notice a sharp pain. I look in the mirror. I have bruises everywhere. Arms, ankles, thighs, but the worst of them are on my shoulders and back. Very, very clearly were what looked like handprints. Albeit elongated ones. I throw up almost instantly. I try to pull myself together and head back to my room. I see my door frame. I see the scratches. I see they line up with my fingers. I see the wood and blood under my fingernails. I have never entirely come to terms with any of it. My fiancé has encouraged me to share, but it still feels deeply uncomfortable and jarring to just walk through it. As I've typed this, my hands have dropped to what feels like sub-zero temperatures and my whole body is shaking. I'm sure if I asked my fiancé, she would tell me I'm also extremely pale. Even more than usual. This is what happens every time I think about it. After many nights spent doing research, watch YouTube videos of ufologist conferences, reading people's reports, the same thing always happens. Physiological response every time. And after a lot of reading and watching, I realized I had another experience when I was 5 years old. It's my clearest childhood memory. And my earliest. Most of my childhood is hazy. I have snapshots. But this one memory I have is exponentially clearer than anything else. Although I've until relatively recently shrugged it off as just a quirk of being young. But I was never the imaginative child that claims to see what they imagine. I always had an extremely firm grasp of reality versus imagination, which is why this earlier episode stands out. It went something like this. I'm 5, it's Easter morning, I wake up super excited to go see my Easter basket. My mom always went way overboard and it was essentially Christmas in spring. Only child FTW. Anyway, I jump up and sneak out of my room. It's just before dawn. Still dark out, but light is starting to refract around the horizon, making everything that dark twilight. I sneak down the hallway, well aware my parents are still asleep, and hoping they'll wake up soon so I can go tear into a massive basket of toys and candy. As I get to the end of the hallway and peek into the living room, I see it. At first I think my parents are up, but as I get a clear look at it, this part is slightly fuzzy. I remember it was big, tall, gray, and something about its skin made me think of short fur, so naturally I thought it was the Easter Bunny, or my dad dressed up as the Easter Bunny, the thing's actual foe. Eludes me, just that it was tall and gray. The weird thing is, when I picture it in my head, everything else in the scene is crystal clear. Everything. Except that. I can see it in my head and it's like someone put a blur filter over this thing's shape. Like what they do for people's faces on cops. Maybe that's where I got the impression of fur, or maybe it really was blurry in real life, like active camouflage, or it was done after the fact, assuming it is what I now believe it to be. As I said, this experience cannot be substantiated by physical evidence, so I always just shrugged it off until recently. But something about that memory would often pop into my thoughts. Like when I go to the dentist, and everything is great until they lay me down and the light is in my eyes and drills and sucking tubes start going, and this primal terror sets in. Since the primary encounter, that is what usually starts flashing in my head, and the Easter Bunny experience is much less frequent these days, but it still happens all the same. All these tiny and not so tiny things that I never really thought about before seem to make a scary kind of sense in light of the experience I wrote about first. I don't know for sure what happened to me. I am not going to say that I do. All I know is that it wasn't a dream. It wasn't sleep paralysis. I've never sleepwalked. There was physical evidence of something happening. I rage at myself for trying to suppress it and not documenting absolutely everything, although the scratches are very much so still visible on the door frame at my parents' house. I can tell you all the things I know for a fact it was not. And after eliminating those as possibilities, well, I am assuming you know how that saying goes. I apologize profusely for any spelling or grammatical mistakes. As I said above, I am on an iPhone and at this point my hands are shaking like I'm in a freezer. If anyone has questions, I would be more than happy to try to answer them, but what I really would like is to hear from people who have had similar experiences. How it compares to mine, what's the same, what's different. All that. As I was looking for any sort of guidance or help, I contact Muffin and they ended up doing a phone interview for like 2 to 3 hours and gave me the name of a hypnotherapist in Chicago that could take me through it. But the whole thing left a bad taste in my mouth. They kept trying to spin it as positive, trying to say they were benevolent. And I can conclusively say there was absolutely nothing benevolent about them. At all. Maybe not necessarily malevolent, but utterly unconcerned with the state of my well-being for sure. I looked into one's eyes. Most of its face was shadowed, but I could see its eyes. There was nothing kind or benevolent there. I am positive that in that moment I was a thing, not a sentient being, as far as it was concerned. It didn't necessarily feel robotic, more like aloof. I don't know, I could be mistaken. But what I'm not mistaken of is that it was no way, shape, or form a positive experience. Since then, I've been diagnosed with severe abnormal hormonal imbalances. I already had nerve damage and an implanted neurostimulator in my spine, so I've had a lot of scans done. It was put in when I was 16 after an electrocution injury. Fried most of the nerves in my left leg. Anyway, they've looked at my brain a ton. But now I can't have an MRI because of my spinal implant, but a CT revealed an abnormal mass in my brain that was no there on previous scans. They say it's benign, but they can't quite see it in enough resolution to make a definite diagnosis as to what it is. I also have a strange black thing under the skin of my left kneecap, which happens to be right where the nerve damage in that leg is. Dead in the middle of it. It looks like a piece of lead or something under the skin. Tried to have it cut out once, but the doctor couldn't get it. Said it wasn't bothering me and wasn't causing problems. So I should leave it. Aside from the nerve damage, everything else happened soon after the experience. I have another strange side effect, but I'm not 100% sure if it's a result of the neurostimulator changing my body's EM field or something. Else. But I blow out light bulbs. I can document it. I've had friends, family, professors at school, strangers, etc. witness it. It happens with such reliability that based on my proximity and type of bulb I can almost tell when it's going to happen. Lamp used to be next to my bed. Lights kept burning out of exploding. Tried different sockets. Broke out the multimeter, tested everything. All normal. Same result. Moving them away from me fixed the problem. I've even had some of the professors in the engineering department take an interest in helping me figure out exactly what's causing it. I think he thought I was bullshitting him until he saw it happen repeatedly. Walking down a hallway with a low ceiling, 4 fluorescent bulbs burn out just as I walk past them one after the other. It happens all the time, but it's more of an interesting quirk than an actual problem. If we nail down a cause, I'll definitely post what it is. I'm sure I left some stuff out and I've rambled on quite a bit, really sorry about that, it's the anxiety. Edit, I posted this on our abductions too so I could maximize the amount of potential abductee feedback. If you had an experience like this, I would really appreciate your insight. What was similar versus different? I've thought about going through with the hypnotherapy, but a bigger part of me doesn't want to know. I know on a subconscious level that what happened after my memory stops was absolutely horrific. I can't really explain it, it's just a feeling. Absolutely nothing about the experience was pleasant, and I can't imagine them taking me was the worst of it. For people that had similar experiences, does it get better? Does it go away? Or will I likely have these subconscious triggers forever, as I suspect? If I try to watch a movie about abduction like Fire in the Sky or The Fourth Kind, the physiological response is overwhelming. I watch a ton of horror movies. It's like my favorite genre, and I've never had any kind of reaction like that with anything else. Lose all color, start uncontrollable shaking, jaw starts chattering uncontrollably as if I was freezing, my hands start getting clammy and freezing. I've even blacked out once. Only during those 2 movies in particular. Those are by far the worst. But I have lesser reactions to others, or situations that apparently remind me of it enough to trigger it. Sometimes while I lay in bed at night and it's quiet, I start to get absolutely terrified that I'll start to feel that vibration or see that light again. I guess I just want someone that's gone through something similar to tell me it'll get better, but I don't know if it will.